So, welcome. I'm seeing most of you here for the first time today, and it's so great to see so many humans all at once after all of this quarantine and lockdown process. So, welcome to the Sandbox. Can you all hear me? Just give me a show of hands.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for lending your presence. And speaking of presence, it's a word that's increasingly less familiar, as we all go online. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can still make our presence felt and seen and heard, quite or ironically, in moments of shared silence. So let's connect in this silence. Let's start by having a moment of silence where we can all hear vague background sounds and the sound of deep breathing. So from here on, let's have a shared moment of silence until I bring you back. Wonderful. Thank you. So, a warm welcome to you all in the Sandbox, which is a space for all of us to explore and start embodying qualities of the world we want to collectively. It's a space for us to grow our roots and ground ourselves in shared goals. And most of all, it's an invitation for all of us to bring our own little piece of the puzzle and connect with each other. The image of pieces of a puzzle is quite significant, to me at least. We all come with our own unique designs and prints, and the magic happens when it all fits together, to expand, to reach out, and form part of a bigger, more colorful, more vibrant picture. So I don't know about you all, but these days it's somewhat easier to feel like you're this cog in the machine, sitting at home, paying your bills, writing your essays, sending emails, doing your day job, without much interaction with people, without being able to see the trajectory of your thoughts, without being able to enjoy those small, really powerful moments of inexplicable intimacy with a stranger. When you smile at a stranger and they warmly smile back, or the other way around. And it's a lot harder to feel that sense of community and connection these days, these significant ingredients that truly empower if used in the right way. So there's power in presence, and for that reason, there is sheer power right here, right now, to create and to engage. And so we'll be doing just that. All right, so right before we dive into the sandbox, I wanted to flag an initiative that will start running in parallel in soon time. It's a project called Common Ground, where people from different areas, what we'd call an unlikely group of people, will convene and engage with one another and their fields of expertise. So I know that expertise sounds like this very daunting, very big word, but at the end of the day, it's just about the experiences you've had and those experiences that have molded the way you experience the world. And so it's a place for people to convene and ask each other their own questions in the hope of finding themes that bridge across these very specific areas, or in other words, to find common ground. All right, so that's enough from me. Let's get to the launch of the sandbox. And so I'll be handing it over to James and to Krish, who are the black belts of thinking up inspiring ways of approaching the world and bringing it to action. And they'll be walking us through the sandbox.
So, yeah, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm feeling quite good. I really liked what Simran had to say. In particular, she mentioned, this idea of everyone coming with their, it sounds kind of cliche, but unique experiences to come here at what is kind of like a white space and try and create these shared intentions and shared goals. And it's like, the fundamental idea is most other places, it's based on someone else's agenda. It's based on something that's very top down. In contrast, we're coming here kind of, with this blank canvas where we can kind of, not just as individuals, like try and figure things out, but like, figure things out together. And I like, in our previous conversation, you mentioned that this is not, something where you're deciding the agenda or like the other deciding the agenda. It's like where everyone's trying to come in and like try and co-create it together. So I'm quite excited.
So the thing that comes up for me is whenever anyone says this is a blank space, we're all welcome to do it. Sometimes we need some scaffolding, right? So we need some things to like help people. So like a sandbox for me is like you've got the ingredients of a sand, or you've got ingredients of something you can play with. So yeah, I'm curious in what are some of the ingredients that we could create in the space that kind of makes people want to come back and feel like their piece of the puzzle is welcome. Yeah, and it like in a way for it not to be totally chaotic, because I think whenever you leave something totally open, it could turn into a chaotic space where people dominate it. So that's kind of one of my thoughts and my worries. Do you have any ideas?
I think one of the things that comes to mind is we're just talking about connections and like the experience kind of connecting. And one of the things that one of the people in the call kind of mentioned was when you connect with someone and when you find yourself in a context where you're far more comfortable than before, one of the things that happens is like this armor comes off and this like friction is shed. And one of the results is a new shared version of like two cells can kind of like emerge, and then you can like figure things out as a function of that. And I think like one of the tools, which kind of sounds abstract at this point in time, is this idea of repeated intimacy and kind of like pushing the boundaries in terms of trying to be candid, honest and vulnerable. And also I'd probably add being like proactively disinhibited in like what you kind of share. I think like normally you just mentioned like on a blank canvas it's kind of hard to like get these associative thoughts that normally come from like the choreography of great conversations. And so one of the things that I feel would be like a very useful tool is very much this idea of associative riffing and really not feeling afraid if something is irrelevant, but being willing to go in those tangents and trust it will help you come back, or if it's a valuable tangent, you guys can go in it together in a longer time horizon, if that makes sense. Like hold up, I agree with that. Let's go further.
Yeah, I think okay. So I ran into one of the constraints of tangents where I invited a lot of people to the sandbox, and immediately like the thing we're asked is, what is it about? Right? So there is like, I don't know if we're like, I want to cultivate space for like mystery and openness, right? But at the same time, give people some of that safety. And I think a lot of the times, if we already want to know what the end result is before we even go on the journey, I feel like that is the experience we're having a lot of the time. And sure, we may have the end result of everyone has left this room. Maybe we presented something, right? Like something we researched or a book. But I think there's something more to just presenting something that people can just digest. And I kind of want, everyone who's in this room, I do think they bring so much value. Like it wasn't just random people I picked off the street. And through this conversation, like for me, it's like that kind of starting point for them. Like in the chat box, you guys feel free to like riff as well. Like that's your playground as we speak as well. And just like developing that for me is quite exciting because I can see it in my head, but it's about kind of like the ideas. Like what are some of the ideas that you've run into, I guess, that we've both run into that we think we could bring into the space, whether it's speakers, whether it's like practices that you think, could be fruitful in this space?
I think so. The first thing that came to mind was this idea of, externally, I think, you look at kind of each individual surroundings. One of the like preeminent forces is this idea of like various like subconscious scripts that we are encouraged to kind of follow, or that we kind of mimetically copy others. or that we like subconsciously kind of copy the ones around us ourselves. And I think one of the interesting, like, functions that this space could kind of serve is, one, trying to construct new kind of scripts for oneself, like actually like thinking about, why do I do things in a certain way, and like why is this train of thought taking me in a given direction, why have I made certain types of decisions, and also like playing with the design space of those scripts to a certain extent. And so it becomes, there's this book by Agnes Callard where she talks about this idea of aspiration, and like aspiration in her view is not just like aspiring to be someone in the like theoretical sense, but it's also like an embodied thing where you very intentionally like kind of construct construct yourself as you go. And I feel like one of the interesting things that could like emerge from this space, if it's one of candor, vulnerability, and of like just genuine honesty about trying to figure things out oneself and with others, is that it can be a space for like true kind of embodied aspiration. And I feel like the best way for that kind of to emerge is like for me to like stop speaking abstractly about it, but for us to like kind of figure out what real examples of that may look like, and then like just asking a question and then like actually like sticking to that question, like riffing on it for longer, like trying to follow over longer time.
Cool. I like that. I feel like we're speaking a secret language. Like when you said that, something just dropped for me, and it connected. And I think so for me, I guess I'll just reflect on the whole experience today and like all of the pieces of the puzzle to make today happen. And yeah, the trepidation I have of nothing is perfect. Like, there is a lot of things I had in mind that I wanted to have set up before this began. So there's like the animation aspect of this that I kind of wanted to have a taste of what animation was like. I kind of wanted to have a list of guests, perhaps. And I guess I wanted to have the whole Zoom experience a lot more fluid for people, because I've heard a lot of people talk about Zoom being dead for them. And a lot of that was not complete, but I knew from experience that I just needed to launch something. I just needed to be in the space, because there's only so much I could learn before I was in the space. And how do I kind of create? So I want to simultaneously be like, this is a space where I hold it for everyone, but also like, I need help. Like I need to figure out stuff like, how does the website work? How can I invite people beyond my friends circle? But I think, honestly, I think Sim's intro just like put me to ease. And I think that's why I wanted you and Sim, or just like other people in the space, to hold the space as well. Because when I heard, like, I'm pretty sure other people felt what I felt when I was listening to Sim, which was like, whew, like that grounding effect. Yeah, I guess that's kind of like, that's the most alive thing for me right now. Just like not having things figured out before I do something.
Yeah. So I think like one very like concrete example that we can go with, and like an embodied one right now, is like Lucy just shared a comment saying it could be a space of exploring the challenges of a new reality, and she responded, "I've been in such a pessimistic place about the state of the world." And I mean, if she's comfortable with this, I'd like like to ask her to like come in and like share more about that, because someone else kind of agreed. And if she shares that kind of experience, I feel like others would be like, oh yeah, like that's the language I kind of needed for that. And like not just, I would say I'd like her to share that, but then also like one step further would be to kind of like game out, now what, like after describing those feelings, like what are the different ways to react, kind of, like what are the different steps forward, and then different people could like throw in their hat ideal. So I'm not sure that like breaks from the scripts too much, but I feel like that would be interesting to have that co-creation and like have Lucy get involved as well, sharing her thoughts.
Yeah, cool. Feel free to unmute yourself, Lucy.
Wow. Well, James knows every single conversation I have is sort of about the state of the world. And for a long time, I was actually really optimistic about the future and building it with the people that I had around me and grassroots activism. And I was actually really excited for what the new world could look like after all of the craziness that we have built crumbles to the ground, as it is very quickly. But being in lockdown has actually made me really pessimistic about the state of things. And I think that's because both I haven't had the like in-person connections and community supporting me that I did have before, but also I feel like things have sort of taken a bit of a downturn, like we're obviously the brink of civil war in America, and ecologically, I don't even need to explain politically just how shockingly bad the UK government has been. All of the sneaking behind about Brexit, around coronavirus, using corona to distract from the burning of the Amazon, like the list goes on and on and on. And with the like public annexing of the arts from our government, it's just like got me to a really dire place where, you know, it's not even subtle anymore. And the fact that there isn't the space for just mass uprising right now is really scary, because the timescale is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and it's just really confusing about what even to believe with corona, because a lot of my activist friends are saying like you shouldn't buy into it too much, but then it's just a really confusing place to be right now. And I have been terrified by the whole situation, to be completely honest. Like, I've always carried optimism with me, but right now I feel really scared. So
So if I could like just briefly like kind of semi-respond, right? So like one of the things that I found kind of useful is when I've had like challenges in the past, whatever it may be, somehow over time I like observe other people and I like ask them about those challenges and they'll like share their views, and it's always completely different how different people kind of like react and like break them down and kind of think about it, right? And like one example is my housemate Gabriel, right? He's like the most calm / optimistic person, and like not in like a bubbly sense, but like just in a very like concrete way. And you know, it keeps my neurotic self very grounded in contrast, and it's like just a function of like his being, right? And it's the same with, you know, various other people that are around me at given times, that just them, you know, sharing their kind of views on it and like how they would strategize and cope with that given thing. And so I'm wondering, like, as a function of this space, perhaps I'd love to like hear anyone else like interject on if they feel the same way that kind of like Lucy does, and like what they see the best way of, I don't want to use the word coping perhaps, but more like dealing with it, right? Because like you don't want to just take it on the chest. And so I'm wondering like what different people think about that, and like what different responses come to mind if they feel that way. Is that okay, James?
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so you guys, if you leave just like a exclamation mark or something in the chat, we will call on you and you can speak, or you could just wave. So yeah.
Hey.
Hey. I guess you'll go. Hey, Simon.
Exclamation mark. Yeah, I agree on that one. I felt like there was a real drive pre-corona stuff on like collectiveness and like so many kind of like simultaneous uprisings around the world, and it kind of felt like there's something happening, something like moving and driving. And despite, of course, all the like health and safety risks of like this pandemic, there's also a real kind of pushing of like the agenda of fear, like by continuously updating like statistics every single day that people kind of feel like they need to tune into. It kind of instead of gives that like positive, like we will get through this, it's okay, like we'll do what we need to do. It's just like it's getting worse and it's getting worse, and like every like number becomes almost like a countdown type of thing. I don't know, it's like a kind of fear agenda rather than like a positive like this will pass kind of thing. So I think it can only call now for like movements to go like kind of underground and like collate back together in a more systematic way, and not to let kind of the destruction of like the arts and creative careers, which they're trying to do to like push towards cyberspace and kind of like reduce funding for those kind of areas. And yeah, I think people just need to keep pushing and like find those people that they know want to keep moving forward in a positive, like, worldly trajectory, and yeah, group together,
Yeah.
rise with the masses.
I think
We
is it
go
okay?
on.
I was just gonna say, I think it's because Simran put the next exclamation mark, and I think it's a nice segue because Indira mentioned this idea of kind of like going underground and collating together, right? And it like links very much with like literally the first sentence that Simran said initially, which was this being a space of creating, new shared intentions and new shared goals, based on different people's perspectives, right? And I mean, yeah, I'd love to like hear what she thinks.
Yeah, I resonate with that, and I resonate with what you said, Indira. The image that I got when you said that was,
Azyba Indira.
I'm
oh,
Indira.
Oh,
what,
my
what's your
bad, sorry.
Story of our life.
Thank you. I'm
what's
listening.
your name?
I'm Azyba.
Azyba. Hey.
Hi, sorry, I'm not using my own computer.
No. But yeah, I resonated with what you said, and the image that I got when you said, it's time, or maybe this is a time where we're going underground and then pushing back up, which was this image of a seed, under the ground and not seeing much light, but then sprouting up, and growing into a beautiful tree or a tomato plant. I don't know. Um, but I also, Lucy, what you said about just feeling this optimism and wanting to carry it, but then somehow dropping it in this helplessness is also something that I think most of us are having this shared experience in some ways. For me, for a while, I felt guilt in being optimistic. Just this feeling of saying, "Oh, is it me being oblivious or naive to what's going on that is making this optimism come about?" And I'm someone who, I don't use the word hate a lot, but I hate leaving things open-ended. So if someone sends me something and says, "Oh, the world is falling to pieces," I always find a way to tie that up and say, "Well, but there is something." But often it gets framed in a way that is like, "Well, you don't really know, right? You're too optimistic, you're too naive. Why do you always try to say there is hope? Sometimes there is no hope." And those things become very difficult to talk about when someone is taking a more skeptical point of view. Because at the end of the day, I think it's a lot more courageous to have hope and then do something about it than just like, dust your hands and sit back and say, "Well, nothing can be done."
So I'm wondering, what do you think the path looks forward like, or like not even the path, but like what one potential path or script of like activity slash reconceptualized perception one would like take in the face of what you've kind of described?
I would say that guilt, firstly, I've just noticed out of practice that guilt takes me nowhere. I have to be full to be able to give, right? I have to start being so full of hope and of just this drive, this ambition to do stuff, that it flows out of me without me wanting to do anything about it, or without me being able to control, right? This idea or this mindset of abundance. Um, Practically, I would say it's about knowing that you're part of a blueprint and you can create it. So for me, what just helped was to start writing a letter to myself and to say, it started off with me writing, "Where are you?" Which was the first thing I wrote to myself. And then it started following a path, right? The moment you start putting the pen to paper, it just worked for me in a way that I could say, this is the plan I want to do. This is what will fill me up. And my main objective is to just keep that hope going, because without that, I cannot do anything for anyone. I'll probably wallow in self-pity.
I'm gonna tap into the collective intelligence in the room. We've got some exclamation marks from Josh and Dina. Do you want to go first, Josh? What would you like to share?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for all the sharings. I might get a bit like my voice always goes a bit high pitched when I go on Zoom. I guess I had a few things I was thinking of, like people talking about pessimism and optimism. There's this idea, I'll put it in the chat, there's this amazing lecture called Revolutionary Pessimism, which I think James has probably heard me natter on about, by this amazing writer on jazz, but also on like Socialism and American History, Robin Kelly, where he wrote about the blues in the context of this idea of pessimism, where this idea of like being able to like reframe things in a way that gives you agency, even if someone broke your heart or terrible things are happening. So not see optimism and pessimism as like these two like opposing like magnetic things that you have to pick one or the other, but that actually like these qualities can kind of like slip into each other, and how like forms like outside of language can help us to kind of think through these things, like to turn seemingly hopeless situations into kind of beautiful, or situations for connection, or retelling stories, and they can be built on and improvised on. And then that brought me to thinking about when Krish and James were talking about what is the sandbox and needing a scaffolding but not a hierarchy. Makes me think of like whenever people talk about space, or when you were, not everyone, but when you were just talking about holding space and connection and everyone bringing their own piece of the puzzle, but you know, things not being figured out beforehand, reminds me a lot of jazz and how a band would operate. Like, so like how you might have your solo and then you come back, but you're playing chords, you have a prefigured notion of some scaffolding, but you're going off onto these tangents, and that's not scary. You trust each other, but also you're kind of exposing each other, but you're creating something on the spot that can also be built on in future. And it just makes me think of like how we can look to those scaffoldings. It doesn't always have to be in like organizing or in how we've done things before. It could be in sound or in other places that, I mean, I always just talk about sound because James is always like, always bring it back to jazz somehow, but whenever I chat to him, but there you can have, like you were talking about coronavirus, and Lucy was talking about that and how the year feels so, you know, there's all these contradictions happening. In jazz, you can have those contradictions playing out together, and it might be horrible to listen to, but it might also like make for these lovely moments without glossing over the realities of like what is those building blocks. Like when someone plays a dissonant note or something, but James wrote jazz with lots of Zs. So I guess like that's my, that was like what I wanted to share, but I'll put the lecture in the comments because it says it better than me.
Oh, thank you. And Dina, and by the way, if anyone has anything they want to share, they can just drop an exclamation mark or a link in the chat. But Dina, feel free to unmute yourself if you're still about.
Yeah, quite like related to what Lucy was saying. I felt like really, really pessimistic at the beginning of lockdown, but then now I feel like really optimistic, probably more than I've ever been. I think lockdown made me quite like, before lockdown I was quite comfortable like doing what I was doing, and you know, like I think in general there wasn't a lot of like pushing me to, I don't know, like things that I was in like really interested in, like being more sustainable. I was like sustainable enough to the point where I was like comfortable, and I don't know, so it kind of really pushed me, like just for example, like I've been really interested in like growing your own food as one example. Like during lockdown I kind of realized how increasingly like untrustworthy and like not dependable our government is, and like food is a massive thing, and how dependent we are on them to like get such a basic thing like food. And yeah, like just in those things, like, you know, growing our own fruits and vegetables, creating community around that, being more like interdependent as like a society rather than looking at like a higher kind of like government or structure or something. And I think, yeah, like I feel a lot of optimism because I feel like this like chaos has pushed me to actually like try and like you know, do something different, because I feel that, like, you know, I feel like I have to, like, kind of like a survivally instinct, whereas I didn't feel that before because I felt comfortable not to do that. So yeah, as much as it's scary, I feel like I personally need to be scared to do something in the direction where I want to see the world go to. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. Sweet. Yeah, all of your faces and all of the conversations I've had with each one of you individually or as a group has really that has given me hope, that perspective, and knowing that that perspective is not isolated to just a small group of people. I think the biggest thing in this space is for you guys to look at each other and see like how diverse the people in this room are, and how there is a lot of other people kind of wrestling these themes and these ways of being. And yeah, along with everyone else who comes to the Sandbox, I think it would be great if we kind of frame it like, what are the steps we can start doing, instead of, I guess, complaining at something else. Just like think about what ways can we learn to grow food? Can we organize together? Can we have conversations like this? I think that will be the loosest structure that I think I would like to like hold in the space. Just framing it like, what do we want to move towards? Because I think we all know what we want to move away from, but like starting to paint the picture of what does it look like, what does it feel like, smell like, kind of like Sim mentioned at the start. We have an exclamation mark from Karimah. So Karimah, feel free to unmute yourself and share with all the lovely people here.
Hey, yeah, it was something that came up in response to Lucy and Dina and Josh, actually, about something that helps me navigate like feelings of optimism versus pessimism, and then like overwhelm is I try and think about like my emotions more about an orchestra being in harmony rather than being in balance. So like, to go with Josh's example of jazz, if all the instruments were playing at once and they were quote unquote balanced, it wouldn't make for a beautiful piece of music to be living my life to. And, you know, if we're always optimistic and always at this level, it's not sustainable actually, and it's not sustainable for me at least, in the way that I need to educate myself and then give to others and then replenish. But if I think about me in, say, the season of autumn being in harmony, then I know that maybe now is the time actually that I have less energy from others and I need to go into hibernation, need to look after myself, and it's going to be a little bit more shadowy, and no, but that's like the harmony of that season and the harmony of that year in a way. And just that switching for me from going to like harmony helps me to like go easier on myself and to bear less judgment and shame about having those emotions when I'm not feeling like 100%. And it helps me to like remember like, okay, it's just gonna pass. It's just like, I don't know, pessimism having its time to shine, and then something else is gonna come through. And I guess then to respond on to like what you said, James, I feel like now then there's a difference between like observing that and then me going into more like embodiment action mode and being like, okay, but then how do I put into place those tools that are going to enforce like growth? Because optimism doesn't necessarily need to be like positive, but it can just be like growth, like direction. I feel like optimism is more just like a veil to have something to reach towards. So maybe, yeah, like just having those like collective dreams almost. I don't know.
That's super interesting, especially what you said about optimism often making us become too hard on ourselves, right? Like you have to be optimistic just to survive in this world, which shouldn't be the case. Esther, there's an exclamation mark for you.
Hi, also thank you everyone for the thoughts because so much is resonating, like just so many feelings that I think I've felt, and it's really nice to hear them. I guess I've been thinking recently about personal development in, I think particularly in a creative sense, and how, I think I'm a bit confused about like drive, or the idea of drive, and I think maybe this is, I'd be curious to think about if people have thoughts about this, but I think especially maybe with venues being closed, but I think for me it would have been an issue anyway, that a lot of the times I think people think about things that aren't work, or society makes us think about the things that aren't work, that we enjoy and we nurture as hobbies. And I think I've always had a bit of a problem with that word, especially maybe if that feels like a huge part of your life that's growing. But I think I'm just confused about how, if you don't have an outlet to or you're not really sure what your outlet to share them is, or you're not really sure how they're not insular, like how you feel, like, I don't know, the drive to grow them. I sometimes maybe think this about music, where there's kind of live venues and there's bands and maybe there's individual musicians playing together. And I think now I've been thinking at the moment, things closing, there's spaces like bandstands where maybe music would naturally occur, and they seem to be like completely out of use. I just maybe think like in between spaces that aren't necessarily about, I don't know, I think I'm a bit,
no.
It's a bit all over the place, but I think also I was thinking a lot because I think people now at the moment feel like they really need to share online. I think speaking to people who feel like they get a huge sense of fulfillment from sharing something online, but actually know that maybe that's truly, in some ways, there's an emptiness to it, and they kind of wish there was another way they knew how to, especially at this time, share and feel something back in terms of like a creative thing. So I guess that's why this space for me is really exciting, because I think my idea of sharing creativity and what the actual like content, like where the content goes, like I have a huge question mark. That's probably a bit blurry in terms of explanation.
I found it very interesting that you used the word drive and creativity, mainly because there's this design lab in San Francisco which uses this concept that they call riffing, and the basic idea is when they build prototypes for a given product, the way that they communicate about the product is not I build something and then other people like tell me words about what they think about it, but rather I create one thing and then you create something in response and then you create something in response, right? And they're both like driving each other to like push the bounds kind of their creativity. And it's this idea of essentially like, you know, enforcing a certain type of like higher standard of rigor and communicating not just with like mere words, but with like embodied action over time, and like, you know, pushing each other in a given direction. And I just felt like sharing that because I think it's a relevant concept or vehicle given what you said.
Yeah, definitely as well, the idea of riffing. I mean, straight away I was suddenly like, actually that's a big component that feels missing a lot, is that energy exchange or something growing in a space that doesn't feel like a product for display. It's like there's actually something a bit more fierce about it. Yeah, definitely.
I think, me and you have had conversations, Esther, about spaces, and that in between, that third space that's not your home, and that's not work. And I think in order for that riffing to happen, I think that space is a crucial component to that. And Yeah, I guess you don't communicate the space, you just like embody it and you feel it, and people can feel like they can come into it. So I feel like already this conversation feels different than if me and Krish posted a video online and people commented. It feels already different to that. It feels like there is a slight shift and more of a fluidity between the co-creation. I'm also aware Zach and Felix put an exclamation mark, so I'm gonna bring Zach into the conversation. Feel free to unmute yourself, Zach.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I was just thinking, especially now that you were talking about replicating spaces. Right before this call, I was at Tesco doing groceries, and a lady got super mad at the woman at the cashier because she made some mistakes with the change, and she started shouting at her. And you know, like I realized just by asking to this woman working there, like how she was doing and how she was feeling, how people are actually in need of connecting right now. And I think very often we just assume that people do not want to connect because people are afraid of being vulnerable, but sometimes what they're actually waiting for is just a catalyzer or someone to get them started. So I feel like it's true, there's a lot of frustration and a lot of pessimism out there, but there is also a lot of desire to get things changed, and we underestimate that. So I'm thinking of this space also as a space where we can prepare ourselves to become these catalyzers. So like, you know, in our daily interactions with people, I think like a lot of our relationship have become just so transactional, and I'm thinking of how many people we get to know every single day. We take the bus and the bus driver, we just like say hi to him, but or we don't even say hi to him, we just like step in the bus and sit. Or again, at the grocery store, or, you know, people that you just cross their path in your daily commutes. So yeah, that's the first affection of how we can perhaps, you know, create space for one another here, but also translate this into expanding our efforts outside. And the second thing, I've heard someone who was saying that, you know, it's a pandemic and there's a lot of pessimism and we should take care of ourselves. But at the same time, I also believe that there's a lot of healing. And like whenever we decide to engage in personal development, this means unlearning ways of life that we have been taught since forever. And we tend to justify ourselves right now, saying that, you know, a lot has been happening in the world and it's not the right time to focus on these challenges that we're facing. But I actually believe that this just perpetuates an idea of perfection that we have in life, right? That you need to be in the right state of mind to develop yourself and to grow and to heal your traumas. And I don't know, in my personal sphere, I've just reflected a lot on this, and I'm trying to challenge this idea of mastering and being at the perfect status in a perfect spot in order to heal and grow, because I think like the main challenge that I need to learn to face is actually to heal while being under the rain. And yeah, that's just two thoughts that I happen to have while listening to you guys.
I really like what you're saying there, Zach, about personal development as healing. I think it fits really well with some of the anxieties that have come up over the last however long this conversation. Because I think it is, at least in my experience, well, I don't know, it seems true to me that it's the case that you can't really, if you sort of if things feel too much and they're not going to be very different, then you kind of have to find a way to adapt, which is changing. And I think what's happened a lot with the more recent pressures of is that it's become like everyone's having to adapt, and it's almost like too much adaptation all that's required, and so everything feels kind of, I don't know, out of balance or
Are we still connected?
Yeah, I think Felix has a patchy internet. think this could be a good place for. Oh, you're back. Hey, Felix, you cut out for a bit.
Oh no. Yeah, I'm actually kind of. I don't think optimistic is the word, but I do think that people have a lot of potential, and also that it seems now that everyone is very collectively and quite vocally unsatisfied or dissatisfied with what the state of a lot of organized, I guess, society, etc. is. So it's sort of bound to change, and also like having the internet just makes everything way easier to facilitate. Actually, I think that feeling disempowered when you've got when you can spread an idea really far is not necessarily correct. Is not the only interpretation of how things could be. But everyone has that.
That's cool. Thanks for sharing, Felix. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. I think Lucy's going to be the last share, and then me, Krish, and Sim will kind of wrap it up and think of what we can bring into the next week and the next Sandbox sessions. Lucy.
So I know I started the whole conversation with pessimism, but I actually, with listening to everyone's reflections, and also it literally did bring parts of the optimism that I have been feeling that I might have pushed to one side because of how I was feeling today specifically. So thank you so much for bringing back that optimism. And what I just wanted to share is the impermanency of everything and how much freedom that gives us. I think because we've all been brought up in a capitalist society where everything seems so ingrained, and we have all these massive institutions, and it seems like nothing will ever be able to change. It was actually really quite shocking and liberating for me to sort of put things into perspective and realize how impermanent our culture is and how easily everything can and will change. And I know it obviously we've had different epochs of history, but just how quickly things can change is quite mind-blowing. And so we do have power and autonomy within that. It's just making sure that we are on it enough and have enough follow through and enough connection to be able to make sure the future that we are going into is one that we want to be in. But yeah, so ending up on optimism.
Sweet.
Yeah, I enjoyed listening to everyone's views very much. I think James kind of segued to wanting this part now to kind of be returning back to kind of the broader question of kind of what this act of co-creation looks like for all of us. And one note that I kind of wrote was there's a whole set of open questions in kind of what my friend Aaron, who I think has spoken to James, so I'm not sure, has done conversational choreography, right? And what we're trying to do is choreograph together collectively this conversations that are functional and beautiful, and that kind of work to kind of serve the soul to a certain extent. And I think some of the open questions involved in how we engage in that, consciously and intentionally, is this idea of we've had a very interesting conversation thus far, but what is the place for, there's been lots of agreement. So what's the place for agreement? What's the place for disagreement? The place for certain types of rigor and pushing each other, for comfort and discomfort, for calling forth more from the other person or less. And I'm wondering just what James and everyone else's thoughts maybe on what you feel about what was here, but also kind of what was lacking and what could be here, next. And I'd love to hear what James's thoughts are on that.
I think there was so much here. But I think what could be here is the follow through. I want to kind of this space not to leave people with just hope, which you can get loads of different places, but kind of actionable steps as well. I think you mentioned something like a temporary WhatsApp group, perhaps not for this conversation, but creating little pods where we practice some of what we've been talking about, and really highlighting that this place is just the stepping stone. It's just to fuel us to do the main work outside of here. Or like Josh said, a Discord channel or something like that. I think what's missing, and I have in mind to like invite different people who could bring that part of the ingredient. I think it's follow through, distributed follow through. So not just at a bottleneck of an individual, but I guess the ability for people in the chats to like communicate to each other and start building things together. And I think that takes time. So like, I know it's missing a little bit, but I also know that it doesn't happen on the first time people get together, because that doesn't last. So I think, yeah, just like leaving enough time for that to start emerging. Yeah.
If I could interject before Simran jumps in, and actually I feel like it segues nicely to what she started with at the beginning, which was kind of this idea of creating shared intentions again, right? And like so today I was reading something about like how Parliament kind of works, and one of the things they mentioned was towards the end they have this idea of a debate for a motion where there's no vote, but it's just like the last half an hour of debate is just to riff on something, kind of, right? And you'll have the opposition speak about something, and then you'll have the government speak about it, but there's no need for a decision to be made or need like declarative answer. I feel like a lesson that could kind of be taken from that, and maybe like might be a nice functional exercise for us, is this idea of going around and like no need for the intention to be something you're actually going to do or not, but just to even just speculate on like one abstract intention, like regarding hope or whatever, and like one concrete intention, which is like different to kind of what you've done in the past. And like, someone mentioned something pertaining to like, planting stuff, right? Like that's one example. But I feel like it would be a nice like thought exercise. And again, you're not committing to doing it, but it kind of, by virtue of sharing that and declaring that, others will be able to be like, oh, that person kind of wants to do that. I want to do that as well. And maybe some sort of connection could form on that basis over the long term, where you have this shared activity and not just shared communication.
Yeah, I love the sound of that. One other thing that I thought of was, and this is something that started with Fine and Light as well. One thing was so unique to that space was everyone was willing to learn the next thing they want to just, which is often the trap we fall into when we're having conversations with one another, where we're often wondering, okay, what's the next thing I can say? And we don't think about what the other person is telling us. And so we start to listen, it's often met by this sort of awkward and silence because the other person doesn't expect us to be listening in most cases. And so one thing I would, aside from the practical and getting ideas to fruition, and for example, drawing maps, because that really helped me. One thing I would love for also would be a place where we're comfortable silences and just listening to each other speak and way, and then go off on different tangents without worrying about a structure, which is thing started itself, right? James, you didn't give us a structure at all, so it allowed it to be exploration.
On the silence thing, like we started with silence for this, and I mean, I think it was Lucy who mentioned like the chaos kind of that exists within modern politics. I'm just imagining if you had like 2 minutes of silence before Parliament started or before like debates, I feel like it would just have a monumental impact on like the embodied experience of these conversations.
Just in this moment of silence, so with the sounds that come from the backgrounds, from all our backgrounds, and connect with the spaces that we're in together. So just breathing deeply. Just feel the presence of everyone who's part of this session without having to think. There's nothing you have to do. It's just about connecting. And it happens intuitively. It happens so easily. that you're in the presence of each other. You want to reach out, just feel your heart reaching out into the screen. The screen is a portal into one another's worlds. And so just silence. Let's do that. Wonderful. All right, sending you all a warm thought embrace. Session's over.
Thank you.
See you guys next time.